I haven't spoken to my parents in almost 17 years. Not a real conversation anyway. If you ask them, they'll probably tell you I'm just being difficult. They'll say we had a rough patch when I was a kid and that I just never learned how to let things go. That's their word for driving their 11-year-old daughter 2 hours away and leaving her at a state-run home. The worst part wasn't the 4 years I spent in that place waiting for them to come back. The worst part was the day they finally did. They showed up on my 18th birthday, smiling, holding a cheap cake from the grocery store, and acted like nothing ever happened, like they'd just been away on a long trip. And they expected me to just smile back and pick up right where we left off. My name is Ava. I'm 35 now. I live in a different state, hundreds of miles away from that town. My life is quiet. I have a decent job and an office, I pay my rent on time, and my apartment is always clean. I like things in order. People I work with probably just think I'm a private person. I don't do after-work drinks, I don't talk about my weekend plans, and I never, ever talk about my family. It's easier that way. When people find out I don't have contact with my parents, they get this look on their face. You know the one. It's a mix of pity and suspicion. Like they're thinking, what did she do? They always assume it must have been my fault, because what kind of parents just walk away from their kid? Mine, I guess. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. One of those places where everyone knows your business, or at least they think they do. The curtains in every house were like little spy cameras. My mother, Sarah, lived her life for those curtains. Her entire world revolved around what the neighbors thought, what the other parents at school thought, what the cashier at the grocery store thought. Our house was her stage. The lawn had to be perfect. The porch had to be swept. When guests came over, she would put out the good towels and act like we were the happiest family on the block. It was all a performance. I remember I was about 7, maybe 8, and I fell off my bike right in front of our house. My knee was a mess. It was bleeding, full of dirt and gravel. I was crying, more from the shock than the pain. My mom came running out. The first thing she said wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was, "Oh, for heaven's sake, your new dress is ruined. Mrs. Henderson is watching from her window." She was more worried about my dirty dress than my bloody knee. That was my mom. Image was everything. My dad, Michael, he was the opposite. He was like a ghost in our house. His main goal in life was just to keep the peace, which really meant not upsetting my mother. He was a master of avoidance. If I ever tried to talk to him about something, a problem at school, or if I was sad, he would just shut down. He'd get this tired look on his face and say, "Let's not make a fuss," or "Don't bother your mother with that." He wasn't mean. He was just absent. He was there, physically, sitting in his armchair reading the paper, but he wasn't really there for me. It was like he had already checked out. Our house was always quiet, not a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, tense quiet, the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. You learn to walk on eggshells. You learn not to take up space, not to make noise. My parents fought, but not in the way you see in movies. There was no screaming or throwing plates. It was all done in these low, angry whispers behind their closed bedroom door. But you could feel it. The anger would just seep out from under the door and fill the whole house. Then they'd come out and sit down for dinner and pretend nothing was wrong. My mom would ask me about my homework in this tight, brittle voice. My dad would just stare at his food. I felt like I was living with two strangers who just happened to be married to each other. I was just a piece of furniture in their house. I started noticing other things as I got a little older, little clues that something was really wrong. My mom's words would start to get a little soft and slurry at night. She'd laugh a little too loud at things that weren't funny. My dad would just get quieter and quieter, sinking deeper into his chair, trying to become invisible. Sometimes, when I took out the trash, I'd find an empty wine bottle hidden at the bottom of the bin, underneath old newspapers, or a vodka bottle in the back of the pantry, behind the canned goods. I knew, even as a kid, that this was a secret. It was another thing we weren't supposed to talk about, another part of the performance. So I learned to be quiet. I learned to be invisible. I'd go to my room and read books for hours just to stay out of their way. My room was my only safe place. My mom's brother, my Uncle Ray, would visit every few months. He was the complete opposite of my parents. He was loud, always laughing, always telling jokes. He'd walk in and, boom, how's my favorite sister? And give my mom a big hug. He'd clap my dad on the back. He treated them like they were the perfect, happy couple. He had to have known. There's no way he couldn't feel the tension in that house. It was so thick you could taste it. But he just played along. He was part of the show. He was the guy who would go back and tell the rest of the family, "Oh, Sarah and Michael are doing great, and little Ava is getting so big." He helped them maintain the lie. Looking back, I see that my whole childhood was about keeping up this perfect family illusion. They were so terrified of anyone seeing the cracks, the drinking, the fighting, the cold silences. It all had to be hidden, and I was the one who was living in the middle of it. I was the only one who saw it all, every single day. I didn't have the words for it then, but I felt it. I felt like I was holding my breath all the time, just waiting for something to break. I talked to a teacher once. It was a mistake, my biggest mistake. I was in 5th grade, so I was about 10, maybe almost 11. My teacher was Mrs. Davison. She was nice. She was one of those teachers who actually seemed to care about the kids, not just the test scores. One day, she kept me after class for a minute. She said I'd been looking tired. She asked if everything was okay at home, and I don't know why, but I told her, not everything, just a little bit. I said my parents fought a lot. I said my mom cried sometimes, and that my dad just went into the garage. I think I might have mentioned that they drank stuff that made them act weird. I didn't think it was a big deal. I thought maybe all parents did that. Mrs. Davison got this very serious look on her face. She asked me a few more questions, like if I ever felt scared. I told her, no, not really, just sad. She said, "Thank you for telling me, Ava. You were very brave." I went home and I didn't think about it again. About a week later, there was a phone call. I was in the living room trying to do my math homework. My mom answered it in the kitchen. At first, her voice was that fake polite voice she used with strangers. "Hello? Yes, this is Sarah Thompson." Then a long pause. Her voice changed. It got low and sharp. "I'm sorry, who did you say you were with?" Another pause. "No," she said. "No, that's not necessary. Everything is perfectly fine here." I could hear the panic in her voice. It was a sound I'd never heard before. She was talking really fast, trying to sound calm, but it wasn't working. "There must be a misunderstanding," she said. "My daughter is very imaginative. She makes things up sometimes." My stomach just dropped. I knew she was talking about me. She hung up the phone. There was a loud clatter as she slammed the receiver down. She walked into the living room. Her face was pale and her eyes were wild. She looked at me like she'd never seen me before. "What did you do?" she whispered. It was barely a sound, but it was terrifying. "What did you tell them at school?" I just stared at her. I couldn't speak. I felt like I was going to be sick. "I told you," she said, her voice getting louder. "I told you we don't air our dirty laundry. We don't tell people our business." She was breathing hard. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined us." My dad came in from the garage. He must have heard her. He had that look on his face, the one that meant he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked. "Your daughter," she spat, pointing at me. "Your daughter called the wolves to our door, Child Protective Services. They want to do a home visit." My dad's face went white. He looked from her to me and then back again. He didn't say a word to me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't defend me. He just looked at my mom and said, "What are we going to do?" That was the moment I realized I was completely alone. My mom saw me as a traitor. My dad saw me as a problem to be solved. Neither of them saw me as their daughter. The next few days were the quietest I had ever experienced in that house. It was a dead silence. My mom didn't speak to me. She wouldn't even look at me. If I walked into a room she was in, she would just get up and leave. My dad just avoided me. He left for work early and came home late. We ate dinner in total silence. It was suffocating. I felt like a ghost. I had done the one thing you were never, ever supposed to do. I had broken the family rule. I had told the truth, and now I was being punished for it. I tried to apologize to my mom once. I found her in the kitchen, staring out the window. I said, "I'm sorry." She didn't even turn around. She just said, "Sorry doesn't fix this, Ava. You have no idea the damage you've done." I didn't understand then. I thought she was just mad at me. I didn't realize she was terrified. She wasn't scared for me. She was scared for herself, for her reputation. A CPS in our small town? It would have been the ultimate shame. It would have destroyed the perfect picture she had worked so hard to paint. My dad was scared too. I heard him on the phone with Uncle Ray late one night. He was whispering, but I stood outside the door and listened. He was worried about his job. He worked at a local bank. He said, "If this gets out, Ray, an investigation, they could let me go. How would that look?" It was all about how it looked. It was never about what was actually happening in our home. Then, about a week after that phone call, everything changed. It was a Friday. I came home from school, and my mom was in my bedroom. She was folding some of my clothes and putting them into a small duffel bag. She was acting normal. For the first time all week, she even smiled at me. It was a tight, strange smile, but it was a smile. "Hi, sweetie," she said. "How was school?" I was so desperate for things to be okay again that I just went along with it. I said school was fine. I asked her what she was doing. "Oh," she said, zipping up the bag, "we're going on a little trip, a weekend away, just to clear our heads." I felt a huge wave of relief. A trip. That meant they weren't mad anymore. That meant we were going to be a family again. "Where are we going?" I asked. I was excited. We never went on trips. "It's a surprise," she said. "Just a little place for you to stay for a couple of days. A little break. It'll be fun." I should have known. I should have felt that something was wrong. The way she wouldn't look me in the eye. The way my dad was already waiting in the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel. But I was 11, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my parents loved me and that everything was going to be okay. So I grabbed the bag. She told me to pack my toothbrush. "Just the essentials," she said. "You'll only be there for a few days." I went into the bathroom and got my toothbrush and toothpaste. When I came out, my dad was standing in the hallway. He wouldn't look at me. He just said, "Ready to go?" I nodded. I was still smiling. I thought we were going on an adventure. We got in the car. It was our old brown sedan. I sat in the back, the duffel bag on the seat next to me. My mom got in the front passenger seat and turned on the radio. Some cheerful pop song was playing. It felt so out of place. We drove out of our town. I watched the familiar streets and houses disappear. My dad didn't say a word. He just drove. My mom stared straight ahead out the windshield. We drove for a long time, much longer than I expected. We got on the highway and drove for what felt like hours. I saw the signs for the city coming up. "Are we going to the city?" I asked. "We're almost there," my mom said, without turning around. I started to feel a little knot of anxiety in my stomach. This didn't feel like a fun weekend trip. The silence in the car was back, heavier than ever. Finally, my dad took an exit. We were in a part of the city I had never seen before. It was all big, gray buildings and busy streets. He pulled up in front of a large brick building. It looked like a school, but older. There were bars on the lower windows. A sign out front said, "State Department of Children and Family Services, Northwood Residential Facility." I couldn't read all the words, but I saw children and facility. I didn't understand. "What is this place?" I asked. "This is it," my mom said, finally turning to look at me. Her face was blank. There was no emotion on it at all. "This is where you're staying for a little while." My dad turned off the engine. The silence was deafening. "For the weekend?" I asked. My voice was small. "Just for a little while," she repeated, "so things can calm down at home." "It's for the best, Ava." For the best was a phrase she used a lot. It usually meant it was best for her. My dad got out of the car. He didn't look at me. He just walked around and opened my door. "Come on," he said. His voice was flat. I didn't move. I suddenly felt cold all over. "I don't want to go in there," I said. "Ava, don't make a scene," my mom warned from the front seat. Her voice had that sharp edge again. My dad reached in and took my arm. He wasn't rough, but his grip was firm. He pulled me out of the car. He grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat. We walked up the concrete steps to the big glass doors. My mom got out and followed us. She was walking right behind me. I could feel her presence pushing me forward. We went inside. The lobby was sterile and smelled like cleaning supplies. There was a woman sitting behind a high desk, behind a thick pane of glass. My dad walked up to the little opening in the glass. "We're the Thompsons," he said. "We have an appointment." The woman looked at a clipboard. "Ava Thompson?" "Yes," my dad said. She pushed a stack of papers and a pen through the slot. "You need to sign these." My parents stood there for what felt like an eternity, signing papers. My mom's hand was shaking a little as she signed her name. I just stood there, holding my toothbrush in its little plastic case. I was clutching it so hard my knuckles were white. I didn't understand what the papers were. I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that this was wrong. This was very, very wrong. When they were done, the woman behind the glass buzzed a door to the side. "Someone will be out to get her," she said, not even looking at us. My mom turned to me. She knelt down, so her face was level with mine. She tried to smile again. "Okay, sweetie," she said. "You be a good girl. We'll be back to get you in a few days, I promise." She hugged me. It was a quick, stiff hug, like hugging a stranger. She smelled like hairspray and something else. Fear, maybe. "I love you," she said. The words sounded empty. My dad just patted me on the shoulder. He didn't hug me. He didn't say he loved me. He just looked at the floor and said, "Behave yourself, Ava." And then they turned and walked away. They walked back to the glass doors. I watched them go. My mom didn't look back. My dad glanced over his shoulder for just a second, and I saw his face. He looked relieved. I watched through the glass as they got back into the brown sedan. I expected them to wait. I expected them to look back and wave. They didn't. They just drove away. I stood there, watching the car until it turned the corner and disappeared. A door buzzed open behind me, and a woman with a tired face and a set of keys on her belt said, "Okay, Ava, let's go." I didn't move. I just kept staring at the spot where the car had been. They were coming back. They had to. My mom promised. She promised. The first few days were a blur. I was in a state of shock. The woman who met me in the lobby, her name was Carol. She took my duffel bag and looked through it. She took my shoelaces and the cord from my hoodie. "Rules," she said. She led me down a long, pale green hallway that smelled like boiled vegetables and bleach. The floors were shiny and squeaked under her shoes. She showed me to a room. It had 2 metal bunk beds, 4 small lockers, and 1 window with a screen bolted to the outside. "This is you," she said, pointing to a bottom bunk. The mattress was thin and covered in crinkly plastic. There was 1 thin blanket and a flat pillow. A girl was sitting on the other bottom bunk reading a comic book. She didn't look up when we came in. "Your roommate is Maria," Carol said. "Lights out at 9. Breakfast is at 6:30. Don't be late." Then she left. The door clicked shut behind her. I just stood in the middle of the room. I didn't know what to do. I put my duffel bag on the bed. I didn't unpack. I was just staying for a few days. I wouldn't need to unpack. I sat on the edge of the plastic mattress and waited. I waited for dinner. I waited for lights out. I waited for the sun to come up. I kept thinking, they'll be here today. They'll come this afternoon. Every time I heard footsteps in the hall, my heart would jump. I thought it was them. I thought it was my mom and dad coming to take me home, but it never was. The first weekend passed. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On Sunday, other kids had visitors. Families came with bags of snacks and new clothes. I sat by the window in the common room, watching them. I watched the other kids hug their parents. I watched them laugh. I kept my eyes on the parking lot, waiting to see our brown car pull in. It never did. Monday came. They made me go to the on-site school. It was just a few classrooms in the basement of the building. I didn't talk to anyone. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was my mom's promise. A few days. How many was a few? 3? 4? A week went by. 7 days. I started to feel a sick, heavy feeling in my stomach. It was there all the time. I asked Carol, the staff member, "Has anyone called for me?" She looked at my file. "No call, sweetie. My parents are coming to get me soon," I told her. "They promised." She just gave me this sad, tired look and said, "Okay, honey, lunch is in 5 minutes." She'd heard it before. I realized that later. She'd heard that same sentence from 100 other kids. The second week passed, then the third. I stopped watching the parking lot. It hurt too much. I started to understand that a few days was a lie. The other kids in the home, they had stories. Some of them, their parents were in jail. Some, their parents had drug problems and couldn't take care of them. Some were taken away by CPS because of abuse. Their files were full of court orders and official reports. My story was different. I would tell the other kids, "My parents are coming back for me. This is just temporary." They would just look at me. They knew. They knew better than I did. One of the older girls, a teenager named Sasha, told me one day, "Your parents signed you over. It's called a voluntary placement. That means they did it on purpose." I didn't believe her. I told her she was lying. "My mom promised," I said. It was the only thing I had to hold on to. But as the months started to pass, that promise started to feel thinner and thinner. It was like a piece of paper that was getting worn out from being folded and unfolded too many times. Fall turned into winter. The holidays came, Thanksgiving. I sat in the loud, crowded cafeteria and ate turkey and instant mashed potatoes. I thought about our quiet, tense dinners at home. Even that seemed better than this. I thought for sure they would come for Thanksgiving, or at least call. The phone in the hallway never rang for me. Christmas. The staff tried to make it nice. They put up a tree. Local charities donated gifts. We all got a new pair of socks and a board game. I got a letter. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Uncle Ray. It was a Christmas card. On the front was a picture of a snowman. Inside, he had written, "Thinking of you, Ava. Hope you're having a good time with our relatives. We miss you." Relatives. He was still telling the lie my parents had created. He knew where I was. He had to. My dad had called him, but he was pretending. They were all pretending. That card broke something in me. They found me on my 18th birthday, not at the gates of Northwood. I'd aged out of there at 16, but at the small state-subsidized apartment I shared with another girl from the system. It was a Tuesday. I was coming home from my shift at a diner, my apron wadded up in my bag, smelling of coffee and burnt toast, and there they were. They stood beside a car I didn't recognize, a newish-looking sedan that was too clean for our cracked parking lot. My mother wore a pastel coat, the kind she always favored, as if dressing for a garden party instead of a reunion with the daughter she'd thrown away. My father stood a few feet behind her, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched. He was a ghost in a better suit. My first thought wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was a cold, flat disbelief, the kind you get when you see something so impossible it short-circuits your brain. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion. Then my mother smiled. It was the same smile from all the family photos, the one that never quite reached her eyes. Brittle, practiced. "Ava, honey," she said, her voice a little too loud in the quiet afternoon. She took a step forward, her arms opening for a hug that I had no intention of accepting. I stopped walking, my keys digging into my palm. "What are you doing here?" My voice was rough, an unfamiliar sound even to me. It was the voice I'd learned at Northwood, the one you used when you didn't want anyone to see a crack. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Well, it's your birthday, sweetheart. We couldn't miss it." She gestured back toward the car. "We brought you something." On the hood of the car sat a small, square box from a bakery, a cheap cake. The kind of gestures that costs $10 and is meant to erase 7 years. 7 years of birthdays spent watching other girls get phone calls. 7 years of Christmases staring at the smeared glass of a common room window, thinking of Uncle Ray's lying card. My father finally shuffled forward. "You look good, Ava," he mumbled, his eyes fixed on a spot somewhere over my shoulder. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, carved by a life I knew nothing about, a life that hadn't included me. "We thought we could all go out," my mother chirped, recovering her composure. "A nice dinner to celebrate, a fresh start." A fresh start. The words hung in the air between us, obscene. Looking back, I see the breathtaking arrogance of it. They hadn't come to apologize. They had come to collect me, like a coat they'd left in storage, expecting it to be in perfect condition, ready to be worn again now that the weather had changed. At 18, I didn't have the words for it, but I felt it. The colossal, suffocating weight of their delusion. They thought they could just press a button and reset everything, as if the last 7 years were just a bad dream I'd had, as if I hadn't spent 4 of them in a place that smelled of bleach and despair. Northwood wasn't a place you just left behind. It branded you. The first thing they did when you arrived was take your clothes. They gave you a set of gray sweats and a pair of slip-on shoes with no laces. Your name became a number on a file. Your life became a schedule taped to a wall. 7 a.m., wake. 7:30 a.m., breakfast. 3 p.m., group therapy. 9 p.m., lights out. There was no privacy. The doors to the bedrooms had no locks, and the small window in each was a narrow rectangle of reinforced glass looking out onto a brick wall. The silence in that place was different from the silence in my parents' house. The old silence had been heavy, full of things unsaid. This new silence was empty. It was the sound of giving up. I learned to be invisible. I learned that crying got you labeled disruptive, and anger got you a session in the quiet room, which was just a padded closet. The other kids were like me, pieces of families that had broken off. Some were angry, some were numb. We were all experts at reading the subtle shifts in a caseworker's mood, the flicker of pity or annoyance in their eyes. We were survivors. We didn't have parents. We had case files, and my file said voluntary surrender. I learned that from a sympathetic aide a year into my stay. She showed me the paperwork. My mother's looping, perfect signature was at the bottom of a form that relinquished all parental rights. My father's was there too, smaller, like an afterthought. They hadn't just dropped me off for a few days. They had signed me away, like a piece of faulty merchandise they were returning to the store. All to avoid the shame of a CPS investigation, all to keep the neighbors from talking. The curtains in every house on our street were like little spy cameras, and my mother's greatest fear was being the subject of the film. I didn't understand then, not fully, what they were so desperate to hide. I just knew the tension, the way my dad would flinch when my mom's voice got sharp. I remember one night I was 9 and I couldn't sleep. I crept downstairs for a glass of water and saw my mother in the kitchen, sitting at the table in the dark. She wasn't crying, she was just staring at the wall, a half-empty bottle of vodka next to her. She didn't see me. I backed away, my heart pounding. The next morning, she was dressed perfectly, making pancakes, humming a tune. It was like the night before never happened. My dad, he was like a ghost in our house, even then, always trying to smooth things over, to pretend the cracks weren't there. "Your mother's just tired," he'd say. "She's under a lot of stress." That was the secret. Not just the drinking, but the performance, the desperate, frantic effort to maintain the illusion of the perfect family in the perfect house in the perfect little town. I wasn't just a child. I was a witness, the one person who saw behind the curtain. And when I spoke to my teacher, I had threatened to bring the whole stage down. Abandoning me wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was an act of self-preservation. Theirs, not mine. All of this churned inside me as I stood in that parking lot, staring at the 2 strangers who shared my DNA. "A fresh start," I repeated, and the words tasted like ash. I looked from my mother's hopeful, brittle face to my father's averted gaze. He couldn't even look at me. He was a coward then, and he was a coward now. "No," I said. It was just one word, but it felt like the heaviest thing I'd ever lifted. My mother's face crumpled. This was not part of the script. "What do you mean, no? Ava, we're your parents. We're here now. We want to make things right." "You're not my parents," I said, the coldness in my voice finally hardening into something solid, something sharp. "My parents left me at a state facility 7 years ago. They promised they'd be back in a few days." I let the words hang there, a quiet indictment. "You must have me confused with someone else." I saw a flicker of genuine pain in my father's eyes. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Useless. He was always useless. My mother, however, shifted from performative warmth to performative hurt. Her eyes welled up. "How can you be so cruel?" she whispered, as if I were the one who had committed the unforgivable sin. "After everything we've been through. We had a rough patch, we told you that." A rough patch? That's what they called it. 7 years. 4 in Northwood, 2 in a foster home that was better but still not a home. 1 year in this apartment, working 40 hours a week just to feel the ground under my feet. A rough patch. I looked at the cake on the hood of their car. I imagined picking it up and throwing it against their clean windshield, watching the cheap frosting smear across the glass. But I didn't. That would be a scene. It would be messy, and my whole life I had been taught to avoid a mess, first by them and then by the system. So I just shook my head. "I have to go," I said. "I'm tired." I walked past them. I didn't run. I made my steps even and measured, the way I'd learned to walk down the long, echoing halls of Northwood. I could feel their eyes on my back. I slid my key into the lock of my apartment door, turned the knob, and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me. I didn't lock it right away. I stood there, in the silence of my own space, and listened. I heard a car door slam, then another. The sound of an engine starting, and then the quiet rumble of tires pulling away. They were gone. Again. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I didn't cry. I just breathed, in and out. My life was my own. It was a small life, a quiet one, built out of the rubble they'd left behind. But it was mine. Mine, I guess. And I had no intention of ever letting them have a piece of it again. My apartment is quiet. It's a choice. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant groan of traffic from the street below, these are sounds I can control. They are predictable. They ask nothing of me. I keep my life like I keep my spice rack, with all the labels facing forward, alphabetized, nothing out of place. It's the only way I know how to breathe. I was thinking about Mrs. Davison, my 4th grade teacher, the one who started it all. She had kind eyes and smelled like chalk dust and lavender soap. I told her things, not everything, but enough. I told her my mom was sick a lot, that my dad was quiet, that sometimes the house got so loud I'd hide in my closet and count the slats on the door until it stopped. I didn't use words like drinking or fighting. I didn't have them. I just had the feeling, a constant low-grade hum of dread that lived in my stomach. She must have made the call that afternoon, the call that broke the world. Looking back, I see the whole day was a prelude. The air in the house was already heavy, thick with the silence that followed a morning of whispered arguments behind my parents' bedroom door. My mother hadn't come out. My father made me a sandwich for lunch, the bread already stale, and didn't look at me while he did it. He was like a ghost in our house, a polite, sad phantom who moved through rooms without ever really being in them. The phone rang just after 4. It was an old rotary phone, a beige plastic thing mounted on the kitchen wall, and its ring was a shrill, demanding jangle that cut through the quiet like a scream. I was at the kitchen table, trying to do my math homework. My father was in the living room, the television on, but the sound turned down low. He didn't move. The phone rang a second time, a third. It was my mother who finally emerged. She moved like she was walking on a wire, her steps too careful. Her face was pale, her makeup a little smudged at the corners of her eyes. She snatched the receiver off the hook. "Hello?" Her voice was thin, brittle. I watched her face as she listened. It was a slow-motion collapse. First, confusion, then a flicker of recognition, then stark, undiluted panic. Her knuckles went white where she gripped the phone. I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice a strained whisper. She turned, her back pressing against the wall, as if trying to get away from the voice on the other end. Her eyes darted around the kitchen, landing on the half-empty glass of water on the counter, the stack of mail, the crayon drawing I taped to the refrigerator. Then they landed on me. Her eyes, when they finally locked on mine, weren't scared anymore. They were cold, hardened, the kind of look that makes you feel like a bug. "No, everything is fine," she insisted into the phone, her gaze still pinning me to my chair. "Children have imaginations. You know how it is." She forced a laugh. It was a terrible sound, like glass breaking. "Yes, of course. We'll be expecting you." She hung up the phone, her hand lingering on the receiver for a moment before letting it fall. The silence that rushed back in was worse than the ringing. It was heavy, accusatory. My father appeared in the doorway, his shoulders slumped. "Sarah, what is it?" "CPS," she hissed, the letters like venom. "Child Protective Services. They're coming tomorrow because of her." She jerked her chin toward me. "She told them. God knows what she told them." My father's face went slack. He looked from her to me, a deep, weary sadness in his eyes. "Now, Sarah." "Don't you now Sarah me, Michael," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what this means? What people will say? Helen across the street, the women at the club. This will ruin us." Image was everything. I knew that even then. Our lawn was always perfectly manicured. My dresses were always clean, even if my knees were scraped underneath. Our car was always washed. We were the perfect family in the perfect house on the perfect street. It was a performance, and my mother was the director, producer, and lead actress. The call from CPS was a rogue stagehand threatening to pull back the curtain and show the audience the rot backstage. I didn't understand the word complicity then. I just knew my father wouldn't stop her. His role was to smooth the edges, to absorb her anger, to maintain a fragile peace at any cost, even if the cost was me. My mother began to pace, her arms wrapped tight around herself. "We have to do something. We have to fix this." Her eyes were frantic again, scanning the room as if the solution was written on the walls. Then they stopped. She walked back to the phone, her movements suddenly sharp and decisive. She dialed a number from memory. "Ray?" she said, her voice changing again, becoming softer, laced with a desperate plea. "It's Sarah. I need your help. Something's happened." Uncle Ray, my mother's younger brother. He was the fun uncle, the one who always had a silver dollar to pull from behind my ear and a joke ready on his lips. He smelled like peppermint and drove a convertible. To me, he was magic. He was the opposite of the heavy, tense quiet of our house. Looking back, I see he was just a different kind of stage manager. He was the one who would show up at family barbecues and subtly steer my mother away from the wine, refilling her glass with soda water and a lemon wedge, announcing loudly, "Sarah's on a health kick." He was the one who'd laugh off her sharp comments as her being overtired. He was the family's emergency contact, the closer, the one you called to make a problem disappear. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, only my mother's. A series of hushed, frantic explanations. A teacher, an overzealous, a total misunderstanding. They're coming tomorrow, Ray. Tomorrow. There was a long pause. I watched her nod, chewing on her lower lip. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I understand. Yes, it's for the best. For the best? Another phrase I would come to hate. When she hung up the phone that second time, the panic was gone. In its place was a chilling, quiet resolve. She looked at my father, who was still standing uselessly in the doorway. Ray's coming over, she said. He has a plan. The word plan hung in the air. It sounded official, important. I thought it was a plan to prove to the CPS lady that we were a good family. I thought Uncle Ray would come over and make everyone laugh and the whole thing would be a silly mistake. As a child, you believe in rescue. You believe that when things are broken, an adult will come and fix them. That night, the house was different. My parents didn't speak to me, but they spoke to each other in low, urgent whispers in the living room after they thought I was asleep. I lay in my bed, straining to hear through the wall. I caught fragments. No other choice, my father's voice, thin with resignation. Just for a little while, until this blows over. My mother's, sharp and certain. The paperwork, Ray said he'd handle. What do we tell people? I heard the clink of ice cubes in a glass, a sound that always meant my mother was having her special headache medicine. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling my blanket up to my chin. Something cold was coiling in my stomach, the same dread from before, only now it had a name. It was called the plan. I didn't know what it was, but I knew, with the unshakable certainty of a child who has spent her life reading the subtle shifts in the weather of her own home, that it was not a plan to save me. It was a plan to erase me. The problem wasn't the fighting or the drinking. The problem was me, the one who had seen it, the one who had told. The door was shut. The lock was turned. Silence. For a moment, I just stood there, my hands still on the deadbolt, the cold metal a small, hard anchor in the sudden emptiness of my apartment. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and loud in the small entryway. Outside, on the concrete landing, I heard a shuffling sound. A brittle voice, my mother's, said something I couldn't make out, followed by the low, defeated murmur of my father. Then footsteps, 2 sets of them, scuffing down the outdoor staircase, growing fainter and fainter until they were swallowed by the indifferent hum of the city. They were gone, just like that. I didn't move. I stayed pressed against the door, as if I could absorb some of its solid, unfeeling strength. My gaze drifted to the peephole, that tiny glass eye. I had an absurd urge to look through it, to watch them retreat, to see the slump of their shoulders, the shape of their backs as they walked away from me for the second time in my life. I resisted. I didn't want their final image burned into my memory. I already had enough. Looking back, I see that moment as a strange kind of victory, but it didn't feel like one then. At 18, standing in my first real apartment, a cramped 1-bedroom in a transitional housing program, there was no triumph. There was just a vast, hollow space where a family was supposed to be. The anger that had propelled me through the confrontation had evaporated, leaving behind a fine, cold dust of grief. I had done the right thing, the only thing I could do, but it still felt like tearing off a limb that had long since gone numb. Necessary, but brutal. My eyes fell on the box on the floor by the door, the cheap white bakery box with the red string. Happy 18th birthday, Ava. Their peace offering, their ticket for readmission. It sat there, an alien object on my worn linoleum, smelling faintly of sugar and delusion. The sight of it, so pathetic and so calculated, didn't make me angry. It just made me tired, and it made me remember. It made me remember the architect of their first lie, the one who taught them that a problem like me could be packaged up and made to disappear. It made me remember my Uncle Ray. Uncle Ray was the fun one. That was his role in the family play. While my father was a ghost and my mother was a storm cloud, Ray was the visiting sunbeam. He'd show up for holidays with loud shirts and louder jokes, slipping me $20 bills when my mother wasn't looking. He smelled like cologne and hair gel, a sharp, clean scent, so different from the stale, anxious air of our house. He was the one who could make my mother laugh, a real laugh, not the tight, brittle sound she made for the neighbors. He'd pour my dad a drink, clap him on the back, and for a few hours, our house would almost feel like a normal, happy home. A performance, I know now, but a convincing one. The night after the teacher called CPS, Uncle Ray wasn't fun. He showed up late, letting himself in with his own key. I was supposed to be in bed, but the silence in our house had a weight to it that was impossible to sleep under. The kind of silence that's louder than shouting. I crept to the top of the stairs, my small body hidden in the shadows, and watched them in the living room below. My mother was pacing, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She'd been crying. Her face was puffy and blotchy, cuggly in a way she never allowed herself to be. My father sat in his armchair, staring at the blank television screen, a glass of amber liquid sweating in his hand. He looked smaller than usual, shrunken. "It's a disaster, Ray," my mother whispered, her voice raw. "Everything. They'll come here. They'll see. They'll talk to people." "Calm down, Sarah," Ray said. His voice was different. The usual booming cheer was gone, replaced by a low, serious tone I'd never heard before. He was wearing a dark suit, not a loud shirt. He looked like a man who solved problems. "Panicking doesn't help. We need a plan." A plan. That word hung in the air. My father finally spoke, his voice thick. "A plan for what?" "They're going to take her." He didn't sound scared for me. He sounded tired, as if he were discussing a broken appliance. "No, they're not," Ray said, his voice sharp with authority. "Because we're going to get ahead of it. We're going to be proactive." I didn't understand what proactive meant. I just knew it sounded important and serious. I saw my mother stop pacing and look at her brother, a desperate, pleading hope in her eyes. She was a drowning woman, and he was throwing her a rope. "What do you mean?" she asked. Uncle Ray leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He was the family magician, about to perform his greatest trick, making a child disappear. "There's a place, Northwood. It's a residential facility for kids with behavioral issues, emotional problems." He glanced up the stairs, right toward the shadows where I was hiding. I flinched, pulling back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I don't think he saw me. He wasn't looking for me. He was just making sure the stage was clear. "You file for a voluntary placement," he continued, his voice dropping even lower. "You go to them before they come to you. You say she's become unmanageable, difficult, that you're worried about her. You're concerned parents seeking help for your troubled daughter. You control the narrative, Sarah." My mother stared at him. The idea was taking root. I could see it. The relief spreading across her face was sickening. She wasn't losing a daughter. She was shedding a liability. Image was everything. And I had become a stain on her perfect picture. Voluntary? My father mumbled into his glass. We'd be putting her away? It's not putting her away, Michael, Ray snapped, his patience wearing thin. It's a temporary solution. A few weeks, a month, maybe. Just long enough for the CPS thing to blow over. They can't investigate a family that's already taking action, can they? It shows responsibility. It looks good. It looks good. That was the magic phrase. That was the key that unlocked everything for my mother. They'll buy it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I've already made a call, Ray said smoothly. I know a guy who knows a guy. He can grease the wheels. We'll get the paperwork pushed through fast. We say she's having a crisis. We get a doctor to sign off. It's clean. A crisis. I was the crisis. My plea for help had been twisted into a symptom of my own sickness. I sat there on the top step, my pajamas soaked with a cold sweat, and I finally understood. They weren't trying to fix our family. They were trying to hide the broken pieces, and I was the piece that was easiest to throw away. My father said nothing. He just took a long swallow from his glass. He was a ghost, a spectator at his own daughter's vanishing. Uncle Ray put a hand on my mother's shoulder. It's for the best, Sarah, he said. This is how you save the family. I didn't understand then that the family didn't include me. Back in my apartment, the memory faded, leaving the stale air tasting of ash. 18 years old, and the clarity of that night was sharper than ever. It wasn't a panicked decision made in a moment of fear. It was a plan, calculated, executed. My own uncle, the fun one, had drafted the blueprint for my abandonment. I looked at the cake box again. This cheap, sugary apology was part of the same playbook. A simple gesture designed to smooth over an inconvenient truth, to control the narrative. We're a family. We had a rough patch. Let's have some cake. My hand trembled as I bent down and picked up the box. It felt heavier than it should. I walked it through my small living room, past the secondhand couch and the bookshelf filled with paperbacks I'd bought myself, and into the kitchen. I didn't open it. I didn't want to see the frosting, the saccharine lettering. I didn't want to know what flavor it was. To look at it would be to engage with their lie, to give it a moment's consideration. I opened the lid of the tall plastic trash can, the kind the program provided for every unit. It was mostly empty. I held the box over the opening, the red string dangling. For a second, the 11-year-old girl inside me, the one who had waited by the window at Northwood for 730 days before she finally stopped counting, cried out. They came back. But they hadn't. The people who came back weren't parents. They were strangers trying to bury their ghosts. And I wasn't their ghost anymore. I let go. The box landed with a soft, unsatisfying thud at the bottom of the can. It wasn't a dramatic crash. It wasn't a moment of catharsis. It was just a quiet, final act. The closing of a door that should have been locked a long, long time ago. The cake was gone, and so were they. For good, this time. Mine, I guess. That decision was finally mine. They stood there for a moment on the other side of the threshold, two ghosts caught in the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway. My mother's face, which had been arranged into a mask of hopeful forgiveness, crumpled. The change was instant and dramatic, like a stage curtain falling mid-scene. Her lower lip trembled. It was a performance I knew well, the prelude to tears that were always more for her than for anyone else. My father just looked down at his shoes. He was a master of avoidance, a man who could find something fascinating in a scuffed piece of leather to escape the emotional shrapnel flying around him. "Ava, please," my mother began, her voice brittle. I didn't say another word. I just closed the door. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. It was a period at the end of a sentence I'd been waiting 17 years to write. I leaned my forehead against the cool painted wood. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel righteous anger. I felt nothing at all, just a vast hollow space inside my chest where a heart was supposed to be. On the small particle board table that came with the transitional apartment, the cake sat in its plastic dome. "Happy 18th birthday, Ava. A fresh start." The cheap pink frosting was already starting to sweat. A fresh start. As if the last 7 years could be wiped away with sugar and a lie. I picked it up, the flimsy cardboard base bending under the weight. I walked it to the small kitchenette, lifted the lid of the trash can, and dropped it inside. It landed with a dull, unsatisfying thud. I put the lid back on, sealing it in the dark with the coffee grounds and empty ramen packets. My life. Mine, I guess. The next day, Mrs. Gable, my last social worker, called me into her office. It was the same beige room where she'd told me, month after month, that my parents hadn't called. She had a kind, tired face and wore cardigans that always smelled faintly of mints and paperwork. "You're officially aged out, Ava," she said, sliding a manila envelope across her desk. It was thin. "There's a check in there for $250 from the state, a list of resources for housing and employment, and a bus pass good for 1 month. She looked at me, her eyes full of a professional, practiced pity. "Your parents, they mentioned they were hoping to help you get settled." I stared at the envelope. $250 and a bus pass. That was the state's price for my childhood. It felt more honest than the cheap cake. "I'm not taking anything from them," I said. My voice was flat. Mrs. Gable sighed. "I know it's hard, but you're all alone now. It might be wise to accept." "I've been alone since I was 11, I interrupted. I didn't say it with anger, just as a statement of fact. It was like saying the sky was blue. She didn't have a response for that. She just pushed the envelope a little closer to me. That first week of freedom was the most terrifying time of my life. Looking back, I see it wasn't freedom at all. It was just a different kind of cage, one without walls or a curfew. The silence in my tiny one-room apartment off the interstate was a new kind of silence. It wasn't the heavy, tense quiet of my childhood home or the institutional, echoing quiet of Northwood. It was an empty quiet, a vacuum. It threatened to swallow me whole. For the first few nights, I slept with the lights on, the thin blanket pulled up to my chin, listening to the roar of trucks, a sound that proved the world was still moving outside my door. I got a job washing dishes at a 24-hour diner, then a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight. My life became a blur of steam, bleach, cardboard boxes, and exhaustion. My hands were perpetually chapped and raw. My back was a knot of constant dull pain. But every week, I took the cash from my paychecks, smoothed out the wrinkled bills, and put most of it into a shoebox under my bed. Each dollar was a brick. I was building something, a wall, a future, a fortress. I didn't have friends. The other dishwashers and stockers were ghosts, just like me, people working at the edges of the day, too tired for conversation. I learned to keep my head down. I learned that being invisible was a kind of armor. At Northwood, being invisible meant you weren't a target. Out here, it meant you were safe from questions. Where are you from? What about your family? Questions I had no answers for, or rather, answers that would only lead to more questions. A few years later, when I was 21, I was working the register at a gas station. I'd saved enough to enroll in a couple of classes at the community college, studying bookkeeping. It was logical. It was about order. Numbers didn't lie or make promises they couldn't keep. A car pulled up to the pump, a familiar-looking sedan. A man got out, and my breath caught in my throat. It was my Uncle Ray. He looked older, heavier. The fun uncle energy had evaporated, leaving behind a man who looked tired and sour. He didn't see me. He was arguing with a woman in the passenger seat. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could see her gesticulating wildly, her hand movements sharp and angry. I knew those hands. They were my mother's. My own hand started to shake as I processed the transaction for the customer in front of me. I felt a cold sweat prickle my hairline. My training took over. Head down, invisible. I focused on the worn keys of the register, on the smooth slide of the cash drawer. By the time I looked up again, their car was gone. I had to sit down in the back room for 10 minutes, breathing into a paper bag. It wasn't fear of them finding me. It was the shock of seeing the narrative continue without me. The same car, the same fight, the same simmering misery I'd grown up in. Nothing had changed. I wasn't a missing piece of their puzzle. I was a piece they had deliberately removed so the puzzle would fit the picture on the box. That night, for the first time in years, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do. I got curious. I found a distant cousin on social media, someone from my father's side I barely knew, and scrolled through her public posts. There wasn't much, vague platitudes, pictures of her kids, but then I found it. A post from about a year after they'd left me at Northwood. It was a shared link to a local news article. Local man charged with DUI resists arrest. The man was my father. I read the short article, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. He'd been pulled over a block from our old house. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. My mother had been in the car, and the report mentioned she'd been uncooperative. The shame of it, the public record of their failure, must have been suffocating for her. Image was everything. Looking back, I see it all so clearly. The call from CPS wasn't just about the fighting, or the yelling, or my mother's hidden bottles of vodka. I was a witness, a small, silent observer who saw everything. My father's drinking wasn't just a weekend habit. It was a wrecking ball, and they were terrified I'd be the one to tell the world they were living in the ruggle. Getting rid of me wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was about getting rid of the evidence. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel sorrow or pity for them. I felt a grim, cold clarity. They hadn't been protecting their family. They had been protecting their secrets. My abandonment was just another secret to keep. Now, at 35, I live in a quiet apartment complex in a city 3 states away from that town. Everything in my home has a place. The books on my shelves are organized by author. The mugs in my cabinet are hung in a neat row. The bills are paid the day they arrive. This control, this order, it's not a preference. It is the fortress I started building with those first greasy dollars from the diner. It's a life built on the principle that you can only trust what you can control, and you can't control other people. You can only close the door. I live my life by a set of simple, unspoken rules. My keys have a designated bowl by the door. My books are organized by author, then by publication date. My bills are paid the day they arrive. It's a quiet, orderly existence built on the foundation of predictability. It's the only way I know how to feel safe. For years, I thought this system was my defense against the chaos of the past. Looking back, I see it was also a wall I built around a question I was too afraid to ask. Why? The answer didn't come from a tearful confession or a long-lost letter. It came on a Tuesday night, illuminated by the cold, bluish light of my laptop screen. I was 28, 7 years after I'd last seen my parents on my 18th birthday. I couldn't sleep, a rare occurrence, and fell down the rabbit hole of the internet, typing names from my past into a search bar. It's a modern form of haunting, I think. I typed in my mother's name, then my uncle's. Nothing but digital ghosts. Then, almost as an afterthought, I typed in my father's, Michael Reed. The first few results were nothing. A business listing for a hardware store in a neighboring state, a generic social media profile with no picture. But then I saw it. A link to the county's public records archive, a small town's digital filing cabinet. I clicked, my heart giving a strange, dull thud. And there it was, nestled between property tax logs and marriage licenses. A simple, declarative line of text. Case No. 734-CR. Reed, Michael J. Charge, driving under the influence. The date was a little over a year after they left me at Northwood. A year and 2 months to be exact. I stared at the screen, the words stark and emotionless. It was just data, just a fact. But in that moment, 17 years of confusion and heartbreak and a deep, gnawing sense of personal failure collapsed into a single, ugly point of light. It was the kind of clarity that feels like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of you. A rough patch, that's what they called it. It wasn't a rough patch, it was a cover-up. All those years, in the quietest corners of my mind, a small, childish part of me had held on to the story they told. The story of 2 parents who were struggling, who were overwhelmed, who made a terrible, panicked mistake. I had pictured them weeping in the car after they drove away, convincing themselves it was for my own good. A tragic, misguided act of love. The DUI charge burned that fantasy to ash. Looking back, I see it all so clearly. The CPS call wasn't just a threat to their reputation. It was a spotlight, and I was the one holding it. I was the only person who saw the whole picture. I saw the cheap vodka my mother hid in hollowed-out books. I saw my father's glassy eyes and unsteady hands after he'd spent an evening in the garage. I heard the slurred arguments that bled through my bedroom walls. I was the living, breathing archive of their secrets. I was the witness. They didn't get rid of a daughter. They got rid of a liability. The memory of my father driving suddenly, more terrifying. I remembered one Saturday when I was 10. He was taking me to the town library. He'd been working in the yard, which I now know meant drinking beer in the shed. He smelled sweet and sour, like rotten fruit and sweat. He took a corner too fast, the tires squealing, and for a second, the world outside my window tilted at a sickening angle. I remember grabbing the door handle, my knuckles white. He just laughed, a loud booming sound that didn't sound like him. "Whoa there, Speedy," he'd said, ruffling my hair. At the time, I was just scared. A kid scared of a fast turn. Now, as an adult looking back, I see the truth. I see a drunk man driving his child around town. I see an accident waiting to happen. I see a DUI, a public record, a shame so profound it would have shattered the perfect glass house my mother had so carefully constructed. And Uncle Ray, fun Uncle Ray, the fixer, his role snapped into focus too. He wasn't just an enabler who gave my parents a terrible idea. He was a strategist. He was performing risk management. The risk was me, my knowledge, the possibility that I might talk again, not to a teacher, but to a police officer, To a social worker who wouldn't be so easily fooled, Northwood wasn't a last resort, it was a solution. A clean, legal, and permanent way to silence a witness and seal away the evidence. It was brilliant in its own monstrous way. The phrase my mother whispered in the car that day echoed in my head, but the words had a different weight now. It's for the best. Not for my best, for theirs. Every detail of that day was recast in this horrifying new light. My father's silence in the car wasn't the quiet grief of a man losing his daughter. It was the tense silence of a man who had just dodged a bullet. My mother's brittle smile wasn't a brave face. It was the mask of someone who had just secured their future. The sterile office, the crisp paperwork they signed without hesitation. It was a transaction. They were closing a deal. The relief I'd mistaken for numbness on their faces as they walked away was just that, relief. They were free. The DUI charge proved it. A year later, without me there to see it, he finally slipped up in public. But by then, it was just a man's private shame. A fine, a suspended license. There was no child in the picture to complicate things. No long history of abuse for a social worker to uncover. The Trubitt daughter was tucked away in a state facility, her credibility already undermined by the very story they had created to put her there. They had inoculated themselves against the truth. I leaned back from my laptop, the screensaver a swirl of abstract colors. My apartment was silent. Not the heavy, tense quiet of my childhood home, but a clean, empty quiet, a chosen quiet. Everything in its place. No secrets hidden in the cupboards, no lies lingering in the air. For years, I'd carried the weight of their decision as my own failure. I wasn't good enough, wasn't quiet enough, wasn't worth fighting for. But it was never about me. I wasn't a problem child. I was a child with a problem, and that problem was them. The cake on my 18th birthday, the hopeful, smiling faces, the offer of a fresh start. It was the most audacious lie of all. They weren't offering me a fresh start. They were celebrating theirs, the one they had started 7 years earlier. The moment their car pulled away from Northwood, leaving their biggest secret locked behind its gates. And they had the nerve to come back, expecting me to applaud. The cursor blinked on the screen, a tiny rhythmic heartbeat next to the name Michael J. Miller. It was the only thing in the room that seemed to be moving. My own breathing had stopped. My hands were flat on the desk, and I could feel the faint vibration of the laptop's fan through my palms. Operating a vehicle under the influence, March 12, 1999. A year and 2 months after they left me at Northwood. The silence in my apartment was the kind I usually cultivated, the kind I paid for. It was my sanctuary. But now, it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. It was a vacuum, and the single sentence on the screen was rushing in to fill it, expanding, until the pressure in my ears was immense. For 24 years, I had carried a story. It was a heavy, misshapen thing, but it was mine. The story was that my parents, panicked by a call from CPS, had made a terrible, cowardly mistake. They had buckled under the pressure of their small-town world and my mother's obsession with appearances. They had chosen the wrong path in a moment of crisis. It was a story of weakness, a story of failure. It was awful, but it was human. I stared at the date, March 12, 1999. Looking back, I see the old story dissolving like a photograph left in the sun. The edges curled first, then the faces began to fade. The narrative I had built, the one that allowed for some sliver of pathetic human error, bleached away to nothing. In its place, a new image was developing, sharp and cold and brutally clear. The CPS call wasn't the reason. It was the excuse. It was the opportunity. My mind, slow and thick like it was moving through mud, started connecting things. Not the way I had before, piecing together a tragedy of parental collapse. This was different. This was like an auditor following a money trail. It was cold. It was logical. Uncle Ray, the fixer, he didn't just react to the CPS call. He saw the future. He didn't see a niece who needed help or a sister who was drowning. He saw a liability. I was the only one who saw it all. I saw the empty bottles of cheap vodka my mother hid in the laundry hamper. I saw the way my father's hands would shake in the morning, the way his eyes were always bloodshot. I saw him stumble into the garage, fumbling for his car keys after a rough day. I was the little ghost in their house, the silent witness to the slow-motion car crash of their lives. An 11-year-old girl can't testify in court, but she can talk. She can tell a teacher. She can tell a social worker. She can tell the neighbor's kids. An 11-year-old girl is a walking, talking risk. They didn't get rid of a daughter. They got rid of the evidence. My stomach turned, a sour, acidic knot. The anger I had lived with for so long had always been a hot, messy thing, a fire fueled by the hurt of being unwanted, of being left behind. It was the anger of a child crying in a locked room. This new feeling wasn't hot, it was ice. It was a single, perfect shard of it, sliding right into my heart. The plan wasn't just to stop the investigation. It was to discredit the witness, permanently. What is the testimony of a troubled girl with behavioral issues who had to be institutionalized for her own good? It's nothing. It's the rambling of a broken thing. Uncle Ray hadn't just hidden me away. He had professionally, methodically, and successfully assassinated my character. I pushed my chair back from the desk. The scraping sound was violent in the quiet room. I stood up, but my legs felt unsteady, like they weren't entirely mine. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. Cars passed, people walked their dogs. A normal Tuesday evening. My world had been perfectly orderly a few minutes ago, everything in its place. Now, the foundation of my own history was gone, replaced by something rotten. I thought of my father on the drive to Northwood, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw tight. I always thought it was the grim anxiety of what he was about to do to his daughter. I see it now. He wasn't just nervous. He was probably hungover. He was probably terrified I'd say something in the car, something about the night before. His silence wasn't shame. It was damage control. And my mother, her brittle voice, her frantic adjustments of my collar. We have to look presentable, Ava. People are always watching. She wasn't just performing for the staff at Northwood. She was performing for her life. She was playing the part of a concerned mother dealing with a difficult child, a role she had to perfect, because the alternative, the truth, was that she was the co-pilot in a life spiraling toward a DUI, or worse, a public record, the ultimate shame, the very thing her entire existence was geared to avoid. They traded me for their secrets. It was that simple, a clean transaction. My apartment, my fortress of solitude and order, suddenly felt like a museum exhibit of my own delusion. The neat stack of books on the coffee table, the pens aligned perfectly in the cup on my desk, the spice jars in the kitchen, all with their labels facing out. All of it was a reaction to a lie. I had built this life to counteract the chaos of their emotional failure, but it wasn't chaos, it was a strategy. It was a business decision, and I was the cost of doing business. I walked back to the laptop. The screen glowed. Michael J. Miller, DUI. It all made sense. Their reappearance on my 18th birthday, the cheap cake and the plastic smiles. It wasn't a clumsy attempt at reconciliation. It was the final step in their plan. They had to see if it had worked, if I was still a threat. My cold rejection, the door slammed in their faces, must have been a relief. The problem had been solved. The asset had been liquidated, and it was no longer their concern. A rough patch, that's what they called it. I reached out and slowly, deliberately, closed the lid of the laptop. The click was soft, but it felt like a gunshot. The blinking cursor was gone. The glowing screen was gone. But the words were burned into my mind. I stood there in the gathering dark, the last of the day's light fading from the room. The hollow ache of abandonment I had carried for decades was gone. In its place was nothing, a void, the profound, empty peace of knowing the absolute worst. There were no more questions. There were no more shadows. There was only the truth, stark and ugly and stripped of all emotion. I wasn't the victim of a family tragedy. I was a loose end, neatly tied up. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in my apartment. Outside, the city hummed its usual nighttime song, a million lives moving in predictable patterns. My own life, the one I had constructed with such painstaking care, had just been demolished, not by a wrecking ball, but by a single grainy PDF. A public record. Michael Reed, DUI, first offense. The date was the important part. A year and 3 months after they drove me to Northwood. A year after the rough patch was supposedly over. For hours, I just sat there. The anger I expected didn't come. Not the hot, screaming kind anyway. This was different. It was a cold, clarifying dread. The kind you feel when you realize the monster wasn't just in the closet. It was the one tucking you in at night. The fortress I'd built around myself, with its neat stacks of books and its silent, orderly rooms, suddenly felt like a child's sandcastle against a rising tide. It was built to protect me from a past I thought I understood, from neglect, from weakness, from a terrible, panicked mistake. It was never meant to withstand malice. The old story crumbled. The one where my parents, panicked by a CPS call, made a desperate, clumsy choice. The one where they were just two people drowning in their own mess, flailing and accidentally pulling me under with them. That story, for all its pain, had a sliver of humanity to it. It allowed for error, for regret. This new story, the one illuminated by the DUI record, was clean and sharp as a shard of glass. It was a story of risk management. Looking back, I see the whole thing with a horrifying new lens. I wasn't an inconvenient child. I was a liability, the sole witness, the one person who saw the empty vodka bottles hidden in the laundry hamper, the one who heard the slurred, vicious arguments that bled through the walls after I was supposed to be asleep. My call to Mrs. Gable wasn't a cry for help. To them, it was the whistle being blown. It was a threat to the carefully constructed stage play of their lives. My father, the ghost in our house, wasn't just passive. His silence was a strategy. My mother, with her frantic obsession with appearances, wasn't just narcissistic. She was a general defending the borders of her fragile kingdom. The small Midwestern town wasn't just a setting, it was the audience they could never afford to lose. And Uncle Ray, he wasn't the fun uncle, he was the fixer. The memory of his last visit before they took me away came back, no longer hazy, but in sharp, ugly focus. He'd shown up on a Tuesday afternoon, his big, cheerful car pulling into our driveway like a circus wagon. My mom had been a wreck, her face pale and blotchy, her hands trembling as she chain-smoked on the porch. My dad was just gone. Not physically, but his eyes were a million miles away. Uncle Ray came in, all smiles and loud greetings. He ruffled my hair. "How's my best girl?" he'd boomed, pressing a sticky lollipop into my hand. I didn't understand then, sitting on the stairs and licking the cherry-flavored sugar, that I was being managed. I was being placated while the adults had a serious talk in the kitchen. I could hear their voices, a low, urgent murmur. My mother's, thin and brittle. My father's, a useless, defeated rumble. And Uncle Ray's, the dominant one, calm, practical. His voice was the sound of problems going away. I remember pieces of it. No other way, Sarah. You know what happens if they dig deeper. It's not just about the drinking anymore. A clean break. It's for the best. That phrase again, for the best. A state facility. It's quiet. They'll say she was troubled. It gives you a story, a plausible one. People will feel sorry for you. Back then, I just thought he was helping them figure out how to get through the rough patch. I thought he was fixing things so we could be a family again. I see it now. He wasn't a doctor setting a broken bone. He was a butcher, calmly explaining the most efficient way to amputate a limb to save the body. I was the limb. The business of protecting their secret life was the body. It was a simple, cold calculation. Sending their daughter away was a small price to pay for their own survival. The DUI a year later proved it. They hadn't gotten better. They had just gotten rid of the evidence. The anger finally came. It was a low, steady hum that started in my bones. It wasn't the wild grief of an abandoned child. It was the focused, quiet rage of a witness whose testimony had been stolen. They hadn't just left me, they had erased me. They'd preemptively discredited the one person who could tell the truth, turning her into a troubled kid from a difficult home, a story everyone in that town would eagerly swallow. My meticulously ordered life was a reaction to their chaos. My silence was a shield against their noise. My solitude was a fortress against their lies. But what do you do when you find out the fortress was built on the wrong side of the battlefield? I stood up. The movement was stiff, my joints aching from sitting in one position for so long. I walked to my laptop and clicked print. The printer whirred to life, spitting out the single page that contained the truth. The ink was dark and absolute on the crisp white paper. Michael Reed, DUI. I folded it carefully, twice, and slipped it into my pocket. There was no grand plan, no dramatic movie-style confrontation rehearsed in my head. There was only a single undeniable impulse. I had to go back. Not to the person I was, but to the place. I moved through my apartment with a new kind of purpose. The motions were the same ones I performed every day, but the meaning behind them had changed. I packed a small overnight bag, toothbrush, a change of clothes, a bottle of water. It felt less like packing for a trip and more like gathering supplies for a long overdue excavation. I was going back to the dig site. I turned off the lights, plunging the apartment into the familiar dark. But the quiet was different now. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the silence of a held breath, the kind of silence that comes right before the storm breaks. Down in the garage, my car started with a quiet rumble. The engine was reliable, predictable. I liked that about it. I pulled out onto the empty streets, heading for the highway that led east, back toward the flat, wide-open plains of the Midwest, back toward the town where every curtain was a camera and every secret had a price. 17 years ago, I had made this journey in the back of my parents' car, a terrified child who believed in promises like a few days and we love you. I was a passenger in my own destruction. Tonight, I was driving. My hands were steady on the wheel. The road unfurled before me like a dark ribbon, pulling me back toward the origin point of my life's biggest lie. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know what I would do. I only knew that the silence was over. The story they wrote for me was finished. It was time to tell my own. The miles dissolve under my tires, each one a small, insignificant victory against the distance I had so carefully built. For 15 years, the 150 miles between my apartment and my hometown felt like a continent. Now, it's just a stretch of asphalt. The printout of my father's DUI sits on the passenger seat, a flimsy sheet of paper holding the weight of my entire childhood. It's folded into a neat square, orderly, controlled, everything my life has to be. The flat, open landscape of the city's outskirts slowly gives way to the familiar scenery of my past. The fields, stitched together with barbed wire fences, are the same. The lonely, skeletal trees are the same. Soon, I pass the sign. Welcome to Northwood. Population 4,312. A friendly, hand-painted sign, meant to look charming. To me, it's a warning, a boundary line marking the edge of a cage. My hands tighten on the steering wheel. My knuckles are white. I drive past the high school, its brick facade looking tired and small. I see the corner of the building where Mrs. Albright's classroom was, the window I used to stare out of, the one that faced the street where my mother would eventually pick me up, her smile a little too bright, her perfume a little too strong. I remember sitting in that classroom, my stomach in knots, after I told her, after I broke the one unspoken rule of our family: you do not talk about what happens inside the house. Looking back, I see the town for what it was, a stage, and every resident was both an actor and an audience member. The curtains in every house were like little spy cameras. The front porches were observation decks. The whole town felt like a web of invisible threads, each one connected to a window, a front porch, a gossip chain that hummed with the quiet, vicious energy of people with too little to do and too much to judge. My mother wasn't just afraid of a CPS investigation. She was terrified of the whispers, the phone calls, the sideways glances in the grocery store. She was terrified of the show ending and the audience seeing the rot backstage. The lie had to be protected at any cost. I make the turn onto Elm Street, my street. The trees here are older, forming a dense canopy that casts the road in a perpetual twilight, even in the middle of the day. It's exactly as I remember. The houses are neat, the lawns are green and meticulously edged. It's a street of perfect families living perfect lives. Or at least, that's the performance. And then I see it. Number 214. My old house. I slow the car to a crawl, my foot hovering over the brake. It looks the same, frighteningly so. The siding is still that pale, buttery yellow. The shutters are still forest green. The rose bushes my mother fussed over are still there, pruned into perfect, tight mounds against the foundation. It's a dollhouse, a picture from a magazine. There's a new car in the driveway, a sensible, boring sedan, but the house itself is a time capsule. I can almost see my father's ghost watering the lawn, a ghost even when he was alive. I can almost smell the faint, acrid scent of bleach my mother used to scrub away any evidence of life, of mess, of us. For a second, a phantom ache rises in my chest. The child in me, the one who lived in the quiet spaces of that house, wants to stop. She wants to walk up that familiar concrete path, turn the old brass knob, and find that it was all a nightmare, that they're inside, waiting, sorry, so sorry. But the adult, the 35-year-old woman with the DUI record on her passenger seat, knows better. The anger isn't a hot, flashing thing anymore. It was for a long time. Now it's cold, heavy, a stone in my gut. It's the coldness of realization, the quiet fury that comes from understanding the sheer, calculated mechanics of the betrayal. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of panic. It was a plan. They didn't abandon me to save themselves from a single CPS report. They abandoned me to save themselves from a future of them. My father's drinking wasn't a rough patch. It was a disease, and I was the primary witness. They didn't get rid of a problem. They got rid of the person who could testify to it. They needed to discredit me, to turn me into the troubled kid from the good family, so that if I ever spoke up, no one would believe me. She was always difficult. They did everything for her. She ended up in one of those places, you know. It was a preemptive strike against the truth, and the architect of that plan wasn't my mother with her frantic image-obsessed fear. It wasn't my father with his spineless desire for peace at any price. They were pawns, easily manipulated by their own weaknesses. The architect was Uncle Ray, my fun Uncle Ray, the one who always had a crisp $20 bill for me, the one who told the best jokes at Thanksgiving, the one who called the facility a special school, the one whose voice on the phone with my mother had been low and firm, the voice of a man solving a problem. This is the only way, Sarah. It's clean. It's for the best. He was the fixer. He understood the town, the system, the optics. He knew how to make a problem disappear. I was the problem. I press my foot back on the accelerator, my gaze fixed on my old house in the rearview mirror until it's gone. I don't stop. I'm not here for them. Not yet. Confronting them would be a storm of tears and excuses and performative regret. My mother would cry. My father would stare at the floor. They would talk about a fresh start. It would be a messy, emotional distraction. I need precision. I need the architect. I drive another 3 blocks and turn onto Maple Avenue, his street. His house is different from the others. While the rest of the neighborhood aims for a kind of understated, traditional perfection, Ray's house is louder. It's a newer build, a 2-story colonial with bright white vinyl siding and pillars that look a little too grand for the size of the house. It's aggressively cheerful. His lawn is an almost unnatural shade of green. A brand new SUV, shiny and black, sits in the driveway. The house of a successful man. A man who fixes things. A man who knows how to present a flawless exterior to the world. I pull my car over to the curb across the street, killing the engine. The sudden silence is deafening. For a moment, I just sit here, watching the house. It's so normal, so disgustingly, perfectly normal. A bird chirps on a telephone wire above me. A woman pushes a stroller down the sidewalk, smiling at me with the easy, vacant friendliness of a stranger who doesn't know she's looking at a ghost. I reach over and pick up the folded paper from the passenger seat. The edges are sharp in my hand. This is it. This is the first step. Not an explosion of anger, but a quiet, deliberate insertion of fact into a life built on fiction. I'm not the scared 11-year-old in the back of a car anymore. I'm not the broken teenager they tried to reclaim with a cheap cake. I'm the witness they tried to erase. And I'm back. My heart isn't racing. It's beating a slow, heavy, deliberate rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of a clock ticking. The sound of something ending. I open the car door, the click of the latch echoing on the quiet street. I get out, smooth down my jacket, and with the paper held firmly in my hand, I start walking across the road toward Uncle Ray's perfect, cheerful, lying front door. The paint on his front door is a cheerful, insistent yellow. It's the kind of color that doesn't allow for sadness, a loud declaration of happiness meant to be heard all the way down the block. My knuckles hover inches from the wood. They feel disconnected from my body, small white bones suspended in the cold air. In my other hand, the paper is a thin, sharp rectangle, a public record, a fact. I knock. 3 hard raps that sound too loud in the manicured quiet of his suburban street. For a moment, there is nothing. Just the whisper of wind through the perfectly trimmed hedges that line his walkway. Then, footsteps, quick and light. The lock clicks and the yellow door swings inward. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Uncle Ray stands there, his face splitting into the familiar, practiced grin. He's aged, but he's aged well, the way people with money and no deep-seated worries do. His hair is more salt than pepper now, but it's expensively cut. He wears a soft, gray cashmere sweater. He still looks like the fun uncle, the one who brought the best presents at Christmas and slipped me $20 bills when my mother wasn't looking. Ava, honey, what a surprise. What are you doing out here? His eyes do a quick, reflexive scan of the street behind me, checking for an audience. Old habits. Hello, Ray, I say. My voice is steady, colder than I expected. Come in, come in. Don't stand out there in the cold. He steps back, holding the door wide, a gesture of magnanimous welcome. I hesitate. My entire plan was to get to this door. I didn't think about what came next. But the confrontation can't happen on his doorstep. This isn't a performance for the neighbors. This is for me. I step over the threshold. The house smells like lemon polish and something baking. Apple, maybe. It's immaculate. The hardwood floors shine. The white walls are adorned with tasteful, generic art. And the furniture looks like it was delivered yesterday from a high-end catalog. It's a magazine cover, not a room people live in. No dust, no clutter, no life. It's a stage, just like my childhood home was. Can I get you something? He asks, already moving toward the pristine kitchen. Coffee I'd just put on a pot? Or water? No, I'm fine. I stay standing in the entryway. He stops, turns back to me. The smile is still there, but it's starting to look like it's painted on. My stillness is unnerving him. Good? He asks, his tone shifting from jovial host to concerned uncle. Another performance. He was always good at those. I don't answer. Instead, I walk past him into the living room and stop in front of the cold glass coffee table. I can see my faint reflection in its surface. A woman in a dark coat, her face pale, her hands clenched. I place the folded paper on the glass. The sound is barely a whisper. Ray follows me. He looks from my face to the paper. What's this? A question I have for you, I say. He picks it up. He unfolds it with a casual air, as if it's a receipt I've left behind. The silence stretches, thin and tight like a wire. He reads it once, then again. The folksy charm drains from his face like water from a cracked vase. The muscles in his jaw tighten. The fun uncle evaporates, and in his place is the man I remember from that one single meeting. the pragmatic fixer, the architect. "Where did you get this?" he asks. His voice has lost its warmth. It's flat, businesslike. "It's a public record, Ray, from the county courthouse. Michael Andrews, driving under the influence, October 14th, 1999. I recite the details from memory. They are carved into me now. That's a full year after you all dropped me at Northwood." He places the paper back on the table, lining its edges up perfectly with the edge of the glass. An orderly man, a man who likes to control all the variables. "So," he says, the single word hangs in the air, so full of defiance it feels like a physical blow. There's no shock, no guilt, just a challenge. "So, the story was a lie." My voice doesn't waver. "The story was that you had to get me out of the house because Dad was spiraling and Mom couldn't cope. A rough patch, you called it, a temporary measure to protect me while he got help. But he didn't get help, did he? He got worse. He was still drinking and driving a year later. You didn't send me away to protect me from a temporary problem. You sent me away to cover up a permanent one." He lets out a slow breath. He walks over to a leather armchair and sits down, steepling his fingers. He looks at me not like a niece, but like a business problem that has resurfaced. "You were a child," he says, his voice calm, measured, infuriating. "I'm not a child anymore. Explain it to me." He almost smiles, a thin, bitter little thing. "Your mother called me. She was hysterical. That teacher, the one you talked to, had called CPS. An investigator was coming. To the house, to the school. They were going to start asking questions all over town." He says all over town, like it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. I remember the curtains in every house, like little spy cameras. He and my mother were cut from the same cloth. "Your father," he continues, "was useless, locked in his study with a bottle, pretending it wasn't happening. Your mother, she was going to fall apart. Everything they had built, their reputation, your father's job at the bank, it was all about to go up in smoke because a nosy teacher and a little girl who couldn't keep her mouth shut were about to set the whole thing on fire." The words are like stones. A little girl who couldn't keep her mouth shut, not a scared child reaching out for help, a liability. "So you came up with a plan," I say, finishing for him. "I came up with a solution," he corrects me, "the only one that worked. We couldn't have an investigation. If CPS took you, it would have been a public spectacle. Your parents would be pariahs. But if they voluntarily relinquished you, if they signed the papers themselves, citing family hardship, the state's interest ends. The case is closed. It's clean." Clean, like the lemon polish on his furniture. "It wasn't clean," I say, and for the first time, a tremor enters my voice. I think of the bleach smell at Northwood, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the thin plastic mattress that was always cold. It was a life sentence for me. "It was for the best," he says, and the phrase hits me with the force of a physical memory. "It's for the best, sweetheart." My mother's brittle voice in the car. "We're doing this for the best." My father's hollow echo. "Best for who, Ray?" I ask, my voice dropping to a whisper. "It wasn't best for me. It was best for you, for them, for the image. You didn't save a family. You sacrificed a child to save a facade." He stands up then, his patience finally snapping. The mask of the calm, rational man falls away, and I see the cold fury underneath. "You think you were the only victim?" he spits. "Your mother drank herself into a stupor every night after you were gone. Your father finally lost his job anyway after that DUI. Their lives were ruined. They ruined their own lives. The words tear out of me, louder than I intended. They were adults. They made choices. I was a child. I didn't have a choice. You took it from me. He takes a step toward me, his face hard. We did what we had to do. It wasn't just about the CPS call, Ava. Don't you get it? It was about the future. Your mother couldn't exist in this town with that kind of stain. We needed a permanent solution, something that made anything you'd said or might say later sound like the ramblings of a troubled kid from a broken home. And it worked. By the time they came back for you, who would you tell? Who would believe you over them? We gave them a fresh start. The air leaves my lungs. There it is. The truth, colder and uglier than anything I had imagined. It wasn't a panicked, short-sighted plan. It was a calculated, long-term strategy. They didn't just remove me. They erased me. They discredited me in advance. My 7 years in that place weren't just a consequence. They were a tool, a way to invalidate the witness. I look at him, this man in his cashmere sweater and his perfect, sterile house, the architect of my erasure, and I feel nothing, not hatred, not even anger anymore, just a vast, hollow emptiness, the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. A fresh start, I repeat, the words tasting like ash. They came to my dorm room on my 18th birthday with a cheap cake and offered me a fresh start. I turn and walk back toward the yellow door. I don't look back at him. There's nothing left to say. He won't apologize. He will go to his grave believing he was a hero, the man who saved the family by cutting out the problematic part. My hand closes around the cool metal of the doorknob. "Ava," he says, his voice stopping me. I pause, but don't turn. "For what it's worth," he says, "I am sorry it had to be that way. It had to be that way. Not, I'm sorry for what I did. An admission of unfortunate logistics, not of act." I pull the door open and step out into the cold air. It feels clean against my face. I walk down the path, not looking back, get into my car and shut the door. The engine turns over with a quiet, reliable hum, predictable, solid. I put the folded paper on the passenger seat. It looks small, insignificant, but it isn't. It's the foundation. The truth is ugly and it offers no comfort, but it's solid ground. For the first time in 24 years, I feel like I'm standing on solid ground. I put the car in drive and pull away from the curb, leaving the house with the cheerful yellow door behind me. I had confronted the architect. Now it was time to visit the ruins.